I've got a question for you. What could possibly take Helldivers 2, an already much beloved game, already taken the world by storm, what could take this game and just notch it up to the next level? We already know that we need to get balancing done on the weapons. We already know that we want a regular cadence in terms of the patches and in terms of the warbonds and the content and the major orders. That's a given with a live service model. But my stream and I have been talking about this quite regularly over the past few weeks, finding my own interest in the game waning a little bit, if I'm honest, and finding that I'm playing the game a little bit less, not because I don't like it, just because I feel like it needs more to it. So in today's video, I'm going to go over 5 features that myself and my community members have been discussing and just put them out there, and I'm just really interested to hear your thoughts, and you can sound off in the comments below with any feelings and opinions about what I've said. I will reiterate, folks, this is by no means me saying what I say is absolutely right. You might absolutely disagree with some of the things that I say, but what I'm trying to do is encourage a bit of discourse and dialogue around the topic, because ultimately the more we talk passionately about this game, the more we can drive change for the things that we want. So, with that being said, the first thing that I'm going to go over is just the general content and the strategy in which Arrowhead are using at the moment, and where I think the game perhaps falls short and where it could maybe borrow from as well. Something that I think would be really compelling for the player base is just mixing up the actual content type and the types of game modes that we can play. Whilst the primary gameplay loop is incredibly addictive, I do feel that there is just so much room for Arrowhead to build upon and develop these more interesting styles of play. So, one example that one member of the community brought up, which really grabbed my attention, was the idea of taking the deep dive system from Rock Galactic. If you're not aware of what that is, folks, essentially what it is it's higher level difficulty with 3 missions in a row. You don't get a break in between them. You literally have to progress into each one. And the way that game works is you have to manage resources and things like that to call in resupplies. So as you can imagine, this requires a bit of planning. It's very interesting and also forces you to work really cooperatively. I wonder, is there room for an opportunity of, rather than diving into an operation and doing one mission then pulling back out and going back in again after resetting, is there a way that they could create a game mode where we have to approach 3 or 4 missions in sequence without taking a break, and perhaps the difficulty of each mission ramps up? So we start with 7, it moves to 8, then 9, then maybe something beyond 9, and we get a really odd mixture of different modifiers. More on those in a moment, because I think they miss out some things there as well. And just generally create a more kind of compelling and exciting experience to progress through a series of events. You could also add a new currency system to the game, that you are only rewarded currency for completing that mission type, and perhaps give you the opportunity to spend that on cosmetics that are only available through that mission type. This would give players who are looking for more mileage out of progression-like systems and the cosmetic section of the game something to really get their teeth into, and I think would overall increase engagement, because if you look at games like Rock Galactic, I keep referencing that game, it is a favourite of mine, but I think there's a lot to be taken from it. If you look at the season mode in that game and the way they bake cosmetics in and the kind of currency system around that, it's a really non-invasive and great way of keeping people engaged and giving them something to work towards. I would also say, in terms of Rock Galactic, and this is a bit of a crazy one, what if this deep dive structure that we borrow from Rock Galactic and put into Helldivers 2 had some sort of resource system baked into the gameplay? So you need to either gather things from, I don't know, bug nests, or by killing enemies, that give you a kind of currency that you can spend to bring in the resupplies during the game. So there's that sense of urgency and push-pull, and there's almost like a doomsday clock in the background that you can't quite see, because you're trying to get through a mission quickly, but you're still trying to accrue enough resources to keep yourselves topped off and alive. I don't know, folks, it's a bit of a wacky one, but I just think adding these little subtle game changes could just really shake up the excitement of an already awesome game. Another thing that I think is absolutely begging to be adjusted and tweaked is the modifier system, and I mean that across both the planet modifiers and getting into the bare bones of the way each mission works. I think there's a lot of potential there to make missions a lot more interesting moment to moment, and also in terms of when we're picking our loadouts, how we need to react to what the planet is going to be like. At the moment, there's just a lot of mist and fog knocking around the place. You look at the Mountain Dew planet, I forget its name, the one over on the automaton side with the green mist. It's just a lot of that in different planets and different kind of guises and colours, and I find it, to be honest, more frustrating than I do enjoyable. I was streaming the other night and there was this planet that we were on, again I forget, it was one of the major order planets, this crimson red mist. It was everywhere. It made the game so difficult to be able to see, and I've had this discussion countless times. It's just not fun not being able to see. The blizzards, that's interesting because it's intermittent, and that is kind of like emergent gameplay. It requires you to adjust. I find that a little bit more tolerable. You've got fire tornadoes, you've got meteors coming out of the sky, you've got tremors. That's all really cool, but could they look at little modifiers that affect the enemies perhaps? Things like, if you shoot a hunter, it is going to explode acid that does a little bit of damage to you, meaning that you've got to be really good at getting away from them before you kill them. What if you shot something like a terminid and it dies and it has these little leeches that come out after you, so there's more mobs? Again, that's nicked from Deep Rock. That's just in the front of my head. What if we're fighting the automatons and there's like some sort of modifier called like automaton armory planet, and that means that when drops come in, there is a higher chance for more tanks to spawn? Just things that are going to make the mission have a little bit of a different slant, as opposed to just being the same kind of process over and over again. Helldivers offers an amazing time with emergent gameplay. I don't think you can deny that actually the reason why the game is so fun is just some of the crazy stuff that can happen moment to moment. I'd love to see them lean into that a little bit more and look at things like Left 4 Dead and, again, Deep Rock Galactic for a bit of inspiration here. If you've played Deep Rock Galactic, I'm sure you all know how terrifying it can be when a Korok tyrant weed spawns in the middle of your mission and you've got this massive, hulking, weird plant boss to deal with and still try and complete the mission yourself. I think they could borrow ideas like that from Deep Rock Galactic and get some more emergent mini-boss style events that happen. You know, what if a giant kind of brood mother type massive bile titan creature gets dropped in, and it's like a mini boss with mechanics that you have to kind of step through to make progress in the mission, and it is not avoidable. Remember how terrifying it was in Left 4 Dead when you had your last pills and you had barely any health left and you were just towards the last 25% of a mission, you were all scraping through, then all of a sudden a tank spawns, and a tank could completely derail your run. For those of you that have not played Left 4 Dead, it's a bit of a kind of gauntlet run that you've got to make against zombies and various different nasties, and a tank was this thing that could spawn that was just like massive health pool, could punch you across the map and could completely change the makeup of your run. And I think if you take that idea of the Korok tyrant weed, the tank, all these sort of mini boss encounters that are a type of emergent gameplay that all of a sudden requires you to make snap decisions to kind of enter a scenario that requires a designated way of handling it, I think that would add some really interesting nuance to the way that we play the game. Now, this next one is probably quite a polarizing opinion, and I'm open to people's suggestions on this, but I wonder, is there a way they can lean more into the kind of stereotype, archetype nature of the armor classes that they've put in the game? I feel like the only armor that really sort of lives out the fantasy of its weight is the light armor, and that's simply because you can run faster, you can be less detectable, typically with the scout buff or whatever it's called, the scout perk, and also when you're using the jetpack, you want to be as fast as possible to get as much distance when you're traversing, and I'm an absolutely self-proclaimed jetpack enjoyer, so I'm a bit biased there. But when I look at the medium armor and the heavy armor, I just wonder, is there a way of them leaning into it more? I like playing tanks in MMOs and things like that, and I know the game's not an MMO, but is there a way that me wearing heavy armor can have some sort of more benefit than it does at the moment? I just don't really value being able to take a couple more hits in a combat situation as being a viable reason to switch from light armor to heavy armor. I know I'm not the only person that thinks that, so I'm just sort of thinking, is there a way they could make it more tanky in the sense of I can stand here and I can actually go toe-to-toe with things and take a little bit more damage. It's a really polarizing topic, and I know some of you will probably be like, no, don't want to go near that. But what do you think, folks? Is there any way they could use armor in a more interesting manner? This next one is a bit of a content creator wish, but I do think it would actually really benefit the longevity of the game in terms of community, and that is creating some sort of plugin or add-on, much like what Vermintide have in their game. I don't know if you've seen, but in Vermintide 2, you can go onto a streamer on Twitch, and there's actually a plugin they can enable where your Twitch chat actually has choice in what is going to spawn. And I know one of the tags that they kind of promoted the game with was this kind of Dungeon Master Joel type setup where they're actually in the game making those changes. I don't know about you, I don't know how true that actually ended up being, but it'd be great if, as content creators, we could interact with our communities by allowing them to actually pick things to happen, like, oh, I want you to spawn 5 Bile Titans now, or I want you to drop 2 bot drops either side. Just ways that the community can actually affect the way that we play the game. Technically, I am clueless, so maybe that is an impossibility, but I just think it would be so cool if we could give our communities more of an option to interact with us and also have a grasp over making emergent gameplay feel different. If you're looking for a breakdown of tips and tricks for a highly effective AMR sniper build against automatons, this next video's got you covered. Take care of yourselves, keep having fun, and I'll see you in the next one.